Hey everybody, welcome to Making It. I'm Bob Clagett. I'm here with Jimmy Diresta and David Picciuto, and we're going to talk about some stuff. Before we get to that though, I want to ask you guys to go to iTunes, if that's where you listen to the show, and subscribe to it. Leave us a review, rating, all that stuff helps us get in front of more ears, and that's really helpful for us because it just helps us understand how big the show's getting, who our audience is and all that stuff. So if you could take a second, go over and do that on iTunes, that would be awesome. Now, if you don't listen on iTunes, just so you know, the show is on Stitcher. You can get the RSS feed on our site, makingitpodcast.com. You can put it in whatever podcast listener that you use. So there's lots of different ways to listen. So you don't have to go to iTunes. But before we get going, I want to thank Nicholas Gomez, Luis Gonzalez, Matthew Dickinson, and Rick Rhodes. Those dudes are awesome. They're our biggest supporters on Patreon. All of our people on Patreon who are helping us out are amazing. And we're really grateful for the support over there. Also, we got a donation from Jeffrey Moore this week, and I wanted to say thanks to him.
Thank you.
We really appreciate the support. Even just, you guys that are talking to us on Twitter about the episodes and sending us emails. Oh, man, we got some awesome emails about the
great
whys, like why people are making stuff.
That one really connected with people.
Yeah, that was fantastic. There was some really, really good stuff. So thank you for giving us that feedback because we all read it and we all like to hear it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's get rolling. David, what are you working on?
Nothing really to note about what I'm working on for my channel. I started a couple of videos that are not even for my channel. They're for a couple companies I'm working with. One is Rockler, one is Highland Woodworking, and they're two competing companies. And I don't have any exclusive agreements with them. So hopefully...
Interesting.
That'll be just fine. Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah. It's they're kind of like product overviews for their website. So yeah, nothing for me. I have to pay the bills. So if I can find
nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. That's right. So
shouldn't be ashamed about doing anything like that.
Not at all. So that's what I have.
Well, this is Jimmy. What I've been doing is I finished up that sign that you might see on my social media. That's called the Brompton Cafe, and I hung that today. Today was full of a series of errors. Actually, if you notice, one of the hashtags on Diresta Shop, Dave put up says, "Did you bring the screw gun? I thought you brought the screw gun," or something like that. We were actually at the location, and he looked at me and goes, "Did you pack the screw gun?" I said, "I thought you packed the screw gun," and we actually ended up having to go buy a drill at a local hardware store that nearly burnt out.
Didn't we talk about this on last week or the week before about like if you don't have the right tool or whatever, you just make do with what you have while you're there?
Yeah.
So shouldn't you have drilled those holes with your Leatherman?
Honestly, when you see the video, 1/2-inch steel, and I think in the video you'll see the gentleman who we were installing for happened to have a drill, and we were only able to do 2 holes with that drill, and then we had to do 2 more because his drill battery died and he didn't have a charger. So then we did ultimately end up going to the hardware store, getting a really cheap $40 corded drill, and it nearly burnt out going through 2 more 1/2 inches of solid steel. And anyway, at the end of the day, there was, like I said, there was a series of errors and problems and miscommunications, but we kept it lighthearted and fun, and we learned from today's experience, as we always do. And then we shot the tips video tonight, all night long with Spike and Dave, and we had a couple of laughs. So it ended up being a long, good, productive day. And this week's tips is all about hanging pictures and hanging shelves.
Your tip videos are top notch. Yeah, I love them.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just, this has been Dave's been with me for 7 years, so many dumb things I forgot. He's like, "Hey, remember that time we were in River House and you did that?" I'm like, "Oh my God, that's a great tip." So, there's so many things between the two of us that we've problems we've solved and like things we've done and just, a lot of the stuff is stuff I learned from my dad. I mean, things my dad have been doing. So it's great. It's a lot of fun. It's really a lot of fun putting them out and it's great feedback. So thank you everybody for that.
I need a Dave.
Dave's great. Dave wants to come on, so we'll have Dave on as a guest.
Yeah,
yes, let's
absolutely.
do that.
Yeah, he wants to come on and he's got some funny stuff to do. And Dave's been doing some really good videos. He's really bringing a great sense of humor to his videos, which is fun. Because in the beginning he was like, "Oh, I don't know." He was afraid he was going to look too much like me. And I said, just keep doing stuff and you'll find your voice, just like we always say. And he's developing a really great, lighthearted sense of humor in his videos, and it's good because he's constantly thinking of like good things to shoot and do. So I'm proud of him.
Awesome.
Nice.
So Bob.
Actually, I watched your bandsaw tips video today. It's been in my watch later list for a long time because it's like 20 minutes long or something, and I was kept putting it off. And today I turned it on. I was like, well, I'll watch a few minutes of it and I'll come back to it. And then a minute later, it's over, and I'm like, oh yeah, it was pretty good because it was 20 minutes long and I didn't notice. So it's good stuff. Excellent stuff.
I try and cut out all the pauses. Thank you very much.
Yeah, for me, I've been off work this week for my day job, which has been cool. And I got a bunch of family in town, and then I've been fighting this sinus infection, which you might be able to hear in my voice. So been not terribly productive. Doing a little bit of stuff here and there, but nothing really of note.
Well, I assume both of you, even though you guys haven't been too physically productive, I'm assuming your minds are very productive.
Always.
All the time. I started designing a couple things this week, and even when I'm not making videos, I'm still working. I can work as much as I want to because there's always stuff to do on the website. I can always tweak this and work on this. And yeah, so I started designing my new desk. I got a new computer, and I want to build a desk that's based around kind of like my home recording studio. So yeah.
Nice. I think that would be a good topic for us to come to, not tonight, but at some point about there's, how there's always more work to do when you're doing this on your own. And there's got to be like a point where you have to decide how to handle that.
Last June, when I did my "Hey, I quit my job" video, I said I was going to put out project videos every Friday. I can't do that. I mean, I tried really hard for a long time, but doing the wrap up takes it takes a half a day to shoot on Monday, then it takes a half a day to edit on Tuesday, then I put it out.
You got a lot of work on that.
Yeah, and then throughout the week, I'm like watching videos and taking notes and gathering up what I call the script for the show, and so that takes up a lot of time. And then the website stuff and everything else, I just can't do 2 videos a week. So
yeah,
there's always work to do. And
yeah. Well, my make video is going to be a day late. I'm going to do it tomorrow for Friday, I hope. So, well, sometimes you just can't do it all.
You know what you're going to do for that video?
I think I'm going to bind a book with a kind of a little bit more of a traditional technique.
Oh, nice.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'm going to do a quick notebook.
Interesting.
So it'll be fun. I just did one in class, and it was a practice run, but it went really well. So I'm going to do that for tomorrow's video. Yep.
Yeah, I should be taking advantage of some of this week because I have some commission stuff coming in, and I should be doing that instead of not working at all. But man, being sick makes it really hard to get yourself into the shop. The other day I did try to work, and I went down. I felt kind of woozy, and I went into the shop saying, I shouldn't do this. Like, I don't feel right. I'm going to make a mistake. I just shouldn't go in there. And against my better judgment, went in there, found a piece of wood, started trying to figure something out, went over, made a cut on this barn wood, that I have a very limited supply of this 100-year-old barn wood. Go in and made a cut, and as soon as I did it, I looked at it, and I was like, nope, that's backwards. And so I just set it down, turned around, and walked out of the shop and went back in the house and laid on the couch.
Have we done a show on safety yet?
I don't think so.
Maybe we should.
Though.
We definitely should, because you really have to be, as Jimmy says, present when you're in the shop, and you recognize that you weren't, and you're like, I'm done.
I knew I shouldn't have, but I did it anyway, and it cost me because I had to then work around that mistake.
Yeah. When I get sick, I go right to the shop, work through it.
See,
I just ignore it.
That's
be present and sick.
Yeah, that's what makes the show great. We all have different personalities and different ways we do things.
Honestly, like if it's just like if I'm sick, I mean, if I need to be near the bathroom for whatever reason, other than that, I'm in the shop. Making shit. I just ignore it. I mean, it's not good, and I get criticized by my friends and family. But when I'm sick, I just completely ignore it, and I just power through. And so far so good.
Well, everybody knows their boundaries too. Like if I'm coughing, that's not a big deal. If this was the case where like I could feel myself in my head being woozy, that was the only.
Yeah. Well, if you have like a dizzy fever, then you definitely.
I shouldn't have been there, but
I've been in that experience too, where you just got to step out.
Yeah.
So actually, this week's topic is profits versus perfection, and I think it's a good topic because when you do things like I do, and you're constantly making things for money, there always is that line. You know, you want to be happy. I mean, my most important thing is I want my clients to be happy, so that they feel happy paying me, and that they'll recommend me for other stuff. So that's that's always front and foremost. I guess you could call that perfection. But if the client's happy, then I'm happy, and so that's one thing I'm always looking for. And like I said, that instills repeat business.
Hmm.
You know, so, when it comes down to perfection, it's really just a matter of how much time you're going to spend on something. Like I just made this sign, and I spent a lot more time than I expected to on it. And so, as far as my dollar per hour, I'm under. But when you watch the video, you'll see why. And I actually learned a whole new technique that I otherwise never would have done.
Hmm.
So this particular job was one of those where I was kind of bombarded with like requests and phone calls in one particular day, and I just said, "Sure, no problem, let's do it." And then I always think to myself, "Wow, that means in 7 days from now it has to be done." Ooh, wow, why did I say yes? And installed. Oh, you wanted it installed too, which is another day's worth of work. But I was going to water jet it, and there just wasn't time for that. Taylor sourced out a guy that water jet it in Brooklyn.
What's that mean?
But to have the actual letters cut out with a water jet, which is something I'm going to do next time when you see how much work I put into cutting these letters out. So I said, you know what, I accepted a personal challenge. I said, let me just use the bandsaw. So if you see that sign on my social media, the entire sign was cut out on the bandsaw. Every letter was cut out on the bandsaw.
And this is half-inch steel?
It's, no, the steel itself is actually 14 gauge, which is pretty thick.
Hmm.
But when you look at the sign, it's all letters inside of a big, broad field of metal, and the letters are cut out. So what I did was I cut the metal completely apart. So the metal was cut into eight or nine pieces, and then all welded back together, and every weld line grinded.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I started getting into it, and I got a little desperate. I was like, "Oh man, I'm going to have to abandon this and go another route." Because the whole face started getting all ripply, because you can't put too many welds on sheet metal before it starts to get all wonky. If you go slow, you weld, you tack, and then you wait, you tack somewhere else and you wait. And then all of a sudden, if you tack too many times, the whole thing starts to get hot and it kind of gets a little wrinkle in it. And but I was able to hide it. Did get a wrinkle in it, which I thought was detrimental to having to start over. But I said, let me keep going down the road of trying to fix it. And I fixed it. I put a steel frame. I welded it to a steel frame. And ultimately, I ended up really liking it. I was kind of at a point where I was like, oh, I'm going to have to go back to the water jet guy and just buy myself some time. And anyway, I came in a day late, and they really liked it. And I hadn't even really seen the interior space just because it was a matter of time. But when I brought it in, it fit the interior space perfectly. The handmade quality, which when you look in the video, it's kind of hard to see the super focused. All the letters are bandsawed, and every one of the letters is bandsawed and then filed. So the cut lines are a little wavy because it's cutting through steel, and this, the blades get dull quick. So then I cut close to the line, and then I filed up to the line. So it was a lot of work. Like I said, it was a lot more work than I expected. But I learned a tremendous amount of technique in the process of doing it. So it certainly wasn't a waste of time or money. So when it gets down to perfection, the goal was to get this sign to the client on time, and I basically did that. So,
well, what do you think? What do you think would have been the point where you would have had to give up and go a different direction?
If it didn't look, letter forms. I always talk about letter forms having to look right. If I stood back and those letter forms looked handmade, like really handmade, like if they were handmade in a consistency that was acceptable, and like, oh, that's cute. Oh, wow, those are handmade. Oh, that's beautiful. But when you step back and they're handmade and it just looks sloppy,
right.
Then I would have had to just start over. So I when I made it, I cut close to the line, and then I filed up to the line in every instance that I could. But it was getting hard. Then once you cut the paper away and you get rid of the paper, then there is no line. So you just have to go on your judgment and hope that the line that you're cutting up to is the right one. So then you just step back and you're working on a wire without a net, and you just hope that ultimately, once all the pieces come together, it's going to look right. And so it did look all right. I mean, it wasn't perfect, in quotes, as if it would have been cut on a water jet or a plasma laser or plasma CNC. But the fact that it's handmade, and I could step back and say that I made that whole thing by hand, and I learned a tremendous amount of technique that I otherwise never did. It's just reapplying techniques that I know. I always say to myself, if I could do that, I could do that. And if I can do that, I could certainly do that. I had to keep making it until it was perfect. I had no choice. I wasn't going to deliver something that the client wasn't going to be happy with, just to so-called make some profit.
Mm.
The client had to be happy. And I wanted them to be happy, and I wanted to be happy. I wasn't going to deliver something that just didn't look the way it needed to look, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Bob, you said you just took on some more commission work, so I want to hear what your take is on this.
Well, I mean, I actually get this question from a lot of people who want to start doing like woodworking, to make a little money on the side. And they often ask about the things that and like somebody emailed me this week and asked about some project ideas that he could make quickly with low cost, of investment and stuff that he can make.
I've gotten that question too. There's no magical answer to that,
yeah.
Right? Otherwise,
you could make things out of paper.
Yeah. So I think it's a hard thing to answer because there's a whole lot of stuff wrapped up in like what the answer should be. As far as like who the audience is, who you're trying to sell to, that has a huge thing to do with it. Because if you're selling really high end to a high end crowd, no matter what the thing itself is, you're going to get a different return on your work, no matter how much money you put into it, than if it's a low end crowd. I don't really know how to say that, but the product itself has less to do, I think, than the person that you're going to be selling it to.
Right.
And that also has that same relationship there has a lot to do with expectation. Like if someone's paying you a whole lot of money, they're going to have a very different expectation of the perfection or the finishedness of the thing that you're making for them. If somebody's getting something real cheap at a flea market, their standards are lowered a little bit because they understand that they're not paying a huge amount for it. Well, sometimes they don't understand that and they really want it to be perfect anyway. But so I don't know. I think it's kind of a tough thing just to think about because you almost need some context to be able to answer it. I mean, if you're making something for yourself, if you're making art for yourself, then all bets are off. You'll go down that road of perfection way further than if you were making it to sell, probably. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, it's funny. Not always, because when you watch like fine woodworkers and dovetail nerds, that when they make stuff in their shop, they make it like, oof, it's beautiful. I wonder if some of these people actually, I don't mean to denigrate anybody. I wonder if these people are actually making any money. When you see a shop that's got beautiful cabinets and stuff like that, usually it's somebody that's retired. Again, I don't mean to insult anybody. In my shop, we just like nailed something together quick and nail it and screw it to the wall while we're making a very expensive piece for a client. I was just visited a friend's shop recently, and he makes super high-end stuff. And I was actually relieved to look around and notice like the accoutrements around the shop were just like totally hammered, nailed together, and like hot glued to the wall, and which basically means all their energy is going into the client work.
Right.
And everything around them, in their shop, not talking about their home, but in their shop, I wouldn't say it looks like a disaster, but it's not perfect by any means. Cabinets are what they might have found in the street, just kind of ragtag together. Shelves are just like scraps of wood, just screwed on top of brackets. But meanwhile, they're making incredibly expensive, beautiful pieces for clients. So it's funny sometimes when I see a shop that has like perfect cabinetry behind them and perfect this and perfect that, I'm like, that guy doesn't have any clients.
We used to say that when I worked at the ad agency. If the ad agency's website was too nice, that means they don't have any clients. I take a different approach to this because I don't take on commission work. I turn all commission work down. So what I do is I build a piece and then try to sell it. And a lot of times I'm selling them at handmade events. And I really encourage, I've been thinking about doing this forever. It's like making a sign that says, please touch, because I want people to pick up my pieces and touch and feel them and hold them. And I take a lot of pride in making sure there's no machine marks on my like bandsaw boxes or whatever I'm trying to sell. So I do shoot for perfection, and I have the option of if something took me way longer than I thought I was going to take, this isn't a commission project, so I can just try to charge more for this item. So
Yeah.
I have that luxury, you know. So
Yeah, I have that as well sometimes. Like when I did the flea market, when we did that show about me at the flea market, I did the flea market for another year and a half or two after the show. And it was the same thing. I was making tons of cool things and I could sell them for whatever I wanted. And if someone didn't want it, I knew somebody eventually along would come up. Like if somebody tried to bargain me when I say didn't want it, pretended like they didn't want it, tried to lowball me because it was in an atmosphere where, it's accepted to haggle. I would just say, it's not for sale for that price. It's for sale for this price. And then eventually somebody would come along and appreciate the craftsmanship and buy it. So I've been there too. And it's actually very, very nice to be able to just put all your time and energy into something really sexy and then just stand back and say, I want $1,000 for that. I don't care what anybody says. That's what it's worth for me to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm. And
or to part with it, I should say.
Right. And you'll find that if you don't sell it for $1,000, down the road, you might have to lower that price, So,
oh yeah, if it's something that you don't want to drag around anymore, then you have the option to just say, you know what, I'll take this, I'll less, whatever.
You have to play the game.
Yeah, see, that's really interesting to hear that from both of you because, like, I started to go down that road a long time ago and tried to make a bunch of stuff to sell at a couple of shows and had no luck with it at all. And I know that happens on occasion. It's not like I expected for it all to sell, but I came away from those two experiences just with like a bad taste in that, like, pre-produce some stuff, hope that people want it. And I understand, like, maybe producing one of something to, to show off, this is what I can do. Maybe you want to order some of these or whatever. But I had spent like a month or two just building inventory, like making duplicates of these things and over and over and over. And I invested all this time and wasn't able to sell them. And it just put a bad taste in my mouth, and from then on, it's always been like, well, yeah, if somebody wants me to make something, yes, I will make it for them, and I'll try to charge what's fair, but I know what I'm getting and, I'm covering my time and all that stuff. But it felt to me, like just a bad investment of my month, to produce all that stuff and just hope that it sold.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it also depends on the theater where you're at trying to sell stuff,
that's true.
If I don't know. I assume maybe you were at Maker Faire. I don't know where you were, or were you at a craft fair, or were you?
Yeah, they were like craft fair and store opening type things.
Yeah, because it's difficult. You gotta kind of establish a stronghold in a spot, and then when people know they can expect to see you again and again and again. Because when you do these 1-day fairs, those 2-day fairs, it's difficult for people to make a decision to buy something for a couple $100. Or $100 or $50 or $70, whatever it is, and you just have to get lucky.
I kind of treat those, and I'm very very picky about what handmade events that I do, but I treat them as like an artist. So this is my gallery event, So an artist will make a bunch of paintings or sculptures, and then they have a gallery event somewhere. They might not sell anything, and so I'm treating it the same way. Like I'm presenting myself. Here I am. You have the option of buying it here and now.
Right. Yeah.
I guess that's another context thing because if you're looking at it as an artist, which I hadn't thought of it that way. That actually makes a lot of sense. I'm just in general more of a kind of fill a need type person. Like purpose built kind of. That's an interesting difference.
Mm-hmm.
You, Bob, you said something a few minutes ago, which I'm just looking at my notes. You said when you first said context thing, and an interesting thing that I typically do is I mention it all the time. People are constantly asking me to do stuff, whether it's friends or family. And my neighbors, my friends and family, I don't charge them at all. If they're like, no, let me pay you something. I say no, because this way I can give it to them and then I could move on. I can give them whatever I'm like, you know what? I'm not charging. I'm giving you raw wood. You paint it yourself. That kind of thing. Because if I am getting paid and I'm getting paid well, I'll do exactly what the client wants. Again, the Crown Royal thing, I got paid well. The sign broke. I went and fixed it. no problem. I help. I want, as far as that scale of perfection. Somebody wants a shelf for their apartment. I'll cut the wood quick. I go, hey, you sand the edges. You do it yourself. Oh, let me give you money. No, don't give me money, because then all of a sudden I have to sand the edges, and I have to put it up, and I have to screw it to your wall.
Yeah.
So it's like, again, it's a context thing. When I'm helping friends and family, and I know that they're not helpless, I'll get them down the road to a certain extent. I'll say, here you go. You're on your own. Don't pay me, whatever. Buy me dinner, or bring me some. My neighbors are really sweet. They bring me food a lot of the time, and I love it. But I'm more than happy to help. But like I said, when someone says, oh, could you do this for me? I'll pay you. And then even if they're giving you $20, all of a sudden they're like, oh, but this isn't exactly how I expected it. But if I don't even take a dime, they can't say anything. They go, oh my God, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I like that approach.
Your scale of perfection is very different depending on what you're getting paid.
Yeah, so it takes a day to make a shelf where I get paid nothing. It takes a day to make something that I get paid, thousands of dollars. So that day, it's how you want to turn that day into value. You pick and choose those things.
Yeah, another sliding scale that you can kind of gauge the perfection and profit thing is, again, context, but the context of how it's going to be used. If you're building something that's more, useful, something that's going to be used, you have to gauge like the usefulness against the, how it looks and how. I'm not saying you shouldn't try to make things look good, but it depends. There's a big difference between if you're making some shelves for somebody that are going to hold books, or if you're going to make, a carved wooden something that's just going to look really nice on the wall. And so the expectation both on your end and on the person who's going to be buying it needs to be kind of set based on the utility. That's the word I was looking for. On the utility of the object itself.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Yeah. Like a lot of the mobile things I make, they all, everyone knows they're going to get moved around. They're going to have to be durable. A lot of this, these are definitely conversations that have to take place. The expectations and
yeah, you need to clarify that expectation with the person that it's going to, which I think doesn't happen a lot. Like maybe they have their idea, you have your idea, and that just kind of never gets brought up. Is that something you initiate, that type of conversation, Jimmy?
Well, lately a lot of my work has been these like mobile bar units and these things that kind of go on the road and travel, like rock equipment or like stage equipment. And I tell my clients that they're always like, oh, it has to be durable. The last one broke or this. I'm like, these things break constantly. And there's like, no matter what kind of shipping crate I build, no matter how I could make, unless the thing is literally made out of steel and it weighs 500 pounds, there's no way to make these things quote unquote indestructible, because if it gets pushed off of a loading dock and literally falls 4 feet, which at the end of an event when people are packing up, it's not the person that paid all this money for it that's packing it. It's some guy that's getting paid $5-10 an hour. And he absolutely does not care about it at all. His job is to make that volume move from there into a truck. The volume means nothing to him other than it's something that he has to move. He picks things up and he puts them down. That's what his job is. He picks things up and he puts them down. And so there is no finesse. So, a lot of my clients are like, oh, the last thing you made, this thing. I'm like, of course it broke, because it looks like it hit the wall at 30 miles an hour. Like there's nothing I can do to keep it from doing that when no one's around at 4 a.m. and these events get packed away. I was actually pleasantly surprised to hear when I went and worked at the warehouse a few weeks ago to do some repairs on something. The warehouse manager told me, he goes, everything breaks. He goes, there's absolutely nothing that doesn't break. He goes, we made this one thing, and they made these indestructible boxes. He goes, they made a flight from Las Vegas to New York or something. He said, every box broke. They like rumbled around inside the airplane thing. He goes, every box broke. He goes, I've never seen anything not take some damage some way or another. He goes, and in part due to the way it gets handled. If it just sits still and nothing happens to it, it's going to be fine. But when it goes from here to there and it drops and, somebody runs it into a curb and then the wheel breaks off the dolly and then the thing is always constantly, limping along. So when it comes down to perfection, if I made it out of metal, then the metal would bend. I'd get a call that's like, oh yeah, somebody drove into it and it's bent. Can you come and fix it? So I've never not had to fix something that went on the road. It seems that to be the case. And so when I charge somebody for something, I just kind of factor that in, that I know I'm going to have a return visit down the road. And like I
Interesting.
said, it's not because of the quality or anything. Of course, you try and do as durable a job as you can. But if you made a beautiful walnut dovetail cabinet and someone pushed it off of a loading dock, something's going to crack. There's no doubt about it. So,
Can
like I
you
said, these are expectations that come along with these type of jobs.
can either of you think of a time when you bought something or had something made for you that you were not satisfied because the perfection wasn't there? Like maybe housework or whatever?
Yeah, I paid these guys a lot of money to do my porch upstate. And you see my porch in some pictures, and it's going to be in an upcoming video. And they didn't cover the eaves at all. And so the eaves are all open to like the birds and rats. And I have to cover them myself, and I just haven't had a chance to do it. But yeah, they raised the roof and left like this whole big gap, which could have taken them one day to fix it. And now every time I'm up at the house, I look at it and I go, I have to fix that now. I just gave these guys, somewhere in the area of $15,000, and I have to kind of come clean up behind them. They did a nice job for what they did. But I was, I know that if it was me and I was hired to do that for me, I would have fixed all these things. And we kind of had a little bit of an odd communication because they kept traveling in between doing my thing. So they were never around. So it was only a few instances where I came up to the house and they were working. They're nice guys, and I really like them, and I do see them on occasion, but they all moved away, so I don't get a chance to see them that much. They do have family, so when they're in town, they come and visit. And I want to always say, look at that, you guys never finished that. But now it's completely out of context, and it's just, so the timing is left the building, so I can't really point it out now. It would be too weird. One of these days, I'll just fix it.
Yeah, our front steps, they're concrete and they're crumbling really bad. And for 6 months, we've been trying to get somebody to come out here and replace them. And it's just been the hardest thing. Like in Toledo, these companies, they just don't want to do the small residential houses. They have bigger things. And I think finally we found the guy who's coming out on Saturday to give us another quote on there. And my expectation at this point is just so low. Like, we just need new steps now. Like, I don't even care how bad they are. We just want new steps so the city doesn't fine us.
Sounds like a video.
Yeah, pour some concrete steps, man.
Yeah, I'm not into it. See, I get a lot like I bought a stand for my X-Carve CNC router, and like a handful of people were like, why didn't you make a stand? And I don't like making that kind of stuff. I would rather make things that out of wood that are, I don't know, less. I don't want to make shop furniture. I don't want to pour concrete.
That goes back to what I was saying. That's exactly what I was saying before. It's like, I make my shop furniture, quote unquote furniture, tables and stuff. When Dave and I get spurts of inspiration, we're gonna, like, I just got a new chop saw for my birthday last week. So I'm gonna tear out the whole chop saw thing and we're gonna do it. We both made all these plans on Friday last week, and we haven't started it yet because neither one of us really want to. It's such a hassle.
Yeah,
I want to I'll just set the chop saw in a milk crate probably for a month before we actually get to doing that. But yeah, no, it's because I'd rather be building something either for a client, making money, or a video. Mm-hmm. And I guess one of these days I'm going to revamp the tables in my shop. But I'm kind of hanging on, hoping that one day I'll be able to do that for a whole new shop. But that's not going to happen anytime soon. So one of these days I do have to address some of the shoddy shop furniture aspects I have.
Yeah, I try not to do that stuff too much, but on occasion, I'll take like one Saturday every few months or something and just redo a tabletop or redo a shelf or redo something that has to be done. And I've kind of broken down. So I have my shop on one side of a wall, my office on the other side. And in my office, I have my computer, all my stuff, my shipping for all my t-shirts and all that stuff is behind me. I have a whole rack of electronics stuff and my 3D printer. And it's like full of stuff. And so I have some kind of lists of infrastructure stuff that's how I think of it, is like, it's what makes me be able to be productive. And when that list gets too long, then I have to take that time and reorganize my shipping area or reorganize my electronics so I can find what I need when I want to get to it. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of that, but I really value having stuff where I want it, like where I know how to get to it when I want it. Mm-hmm. And so I've actually made a list of the things that have to be kind of caught up with, on a regular basis.
No, it's a necessary evil, and there is definitely no doubt that when it gets down to it, I tear apart the shop, and I have to do a set of shelves over, or I have to put a new tabletop on, or fix the table. So I just did it finally. I just put new fences on my table, so I just put a new fence and a new rail system and a zero clearance thing, which I can change out. So I
Nice.
upgraded my table saw, which I've been using that table saw with that rickety fence for the longest time, and it is much nicer to use it with like a good clean fence that has like the new style. The one I was using is 35, 40 years old.
Hmm.
So eventually it has to come around. You have to do it. You got to wash your clothes once in a while.
You gotta wash your clothes once in a while.
That's our next T-shirt.
Yeah.
I'm laughing about because people see my jeans and they're like, "When's the last time you washed those?" Last week. Why?
That's gross. Well, so I think generally about the profit, the kind of topic, the profit and perfection thing. I think personally, it has a lot to do with context as to how you find that balance. Like what you're doing, what you're working on, what value it carries to you from a money perspective, what value it carries to the person that you're making it for. I think it's a really hard thing to nail down, but there's a lot of factors that you have to pull into it. When you try to figure that out, when time that you've put into it is too much time. And that's
well, let's a lot of times I'll people always say, "How do you charge?" Or, "How do you charge?" I just give somebody a number, and hopefully that number is far beyond that margin of error, so that when I get stuck making something for 4 days that I expected only to do a day and a half on, I just try and find some learning experience in it, so it wasn't all wasted. But like I said, I try and just give a number, but I can't, in good conscience, go back to a client and say, "You know what? I know I told you $2,000-$3,000 for this, and it's taking me like an extra 3 days, so you owe me more money." I can't do that, because I make a commitment,
Right.
and I say this is what it's going to be, and I'm a grown boy. I should know reasonable expectations of what I should be able to do to get it to that point. And if I go beyond that, if for some reason or another, the materials fail or the machine fails me and I have to start over, I do it. And then I just, I never rub it in anybody's face.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, not at all. So, it's totally on me.
And a lot of that comes with experience, right? You've spent so much time making those things, doing the same operations over and over that kind of the failure points, how long it takes you to do things. So it's probably easier. Somebody who's getting started will probably have a tough time for a while adjusting their pricing to understand how long it actually takes them to do something. And that's perfectly fine. Like I was telling somebody in this email conversation I had about this, that, pick a number, because he was asking me about like an hourly rate. Like what's an hourly rate that I should kind of gauge my total price with? And I said, I really don't know. It's different for you. It's different for me because we live in different places. We're doing different things.
Yeah.
But just pick one, do the job. And then when you're done with that job, go back and look at it. And like, was it profitable? No? Okay. Next time that number has to be twice that or whatever. You know? And so, I think when you're getting started, you just have to take that into account that not everything's going to be profitable and that's perfectly fine. But it's getting you closer to...
Yeah, it definitely, comes with experience. I just told a friend of mine recently who's kind of venturing into kind of self-sufficiency as far as a woodworker and a craftsperson. She's a fine woodworker and a craftsperson, but now she's kind of, she's no longer in the quote unquote stage of assisting. She's developing her own clients and so on. And she's real nervous about pricing. I just said, give yourself a day rate. What is your day worth to you, your whole day? What is your day? She said a number. I was like, okay, that's what your day is worth. No dilly-dallying around with the dollar per hour. That's your day rate. If somebody wants to hire you, they hire you for a day. They want to hire you for 2 days, they hire you for 2 days. If you look at a job and you say to yourself, that job is going to take me 2 days, that's 2 days worth of your day rate. You don't need to explain why you came to that number unless they really ask you. So you say, okay, if your day rate's $1,000 a day, that job in your head, inside your inner thoughts, you say that's going to be 2 days worth of work. I'll charge $2,000 plus maybe 10% more for materials, whatever it is, whatever makes sense. And then you give the client that number. And if they say, oh, that's wonderful, when can we start? Then you're in business. And like Bob said, if you have to readjust that after you realize you've spent too much time and not exactly 2 days, maybe you spent 3 or 4, you just got to kind of be, then in that material, that type of job, you have a better gauge. Whatever that job was, if it's building a 10-foot table.
You learn from it, and you take that.
Yeah, you know that job should be 3 days instead of 2 when you first initially thought.
Just so everybody knows, that piece of advice is the first interaction I ever had with Jimmy. I sent him an email asking him about that. Yeah, about that exact same thing, and you said the exact same thing about the day rate. I remember that.
I did? I don't even remember.
It was a long time ago.
That's cool.
Yeah. And it was helpful for me. I started looking at it in a different way, versus pricing the object itself. And it's, the time I put into that object, price the day, and then see how much you can get done in that day.
Because everything takes a day, no matter what. I mean, if you're just going to like dilly-dally after dinner before you go to bed, that's a hobby. But if you're going to like make a table, it's going to take you a day or 2 or 3 days. Nothing takes a half a day. Nobody should know that, a half a day's worth of work is going to be whatever. Yeah. $15 an hour. No one just say a number, and then whatever that number is, make sure you add to it. Mm-hmm. As you go on developing clients, the reason you work for yourself is so you're not trapped in that dollar per hour, wage type of situation. Of course, you work for yourself because it's sort of like a natural progression of, your own independence. But working for yourself has its advantages, and just being able to just tell a client a number and try and work within that number. And, you try and more often than not have that number be hugely profitable. Sometimes it's not going to be, but then you live with the ups and downs of life. Yeah,
it kind of evens out in the end, probably. Mm-hmm. Hopefully.
And then, when it comes to choosing the materials as far as perfection, quote unquote, and durability, and, that you start to realize. And you also start to realize, like I have clients where I've made something out of beautiful oak, and they don't even care. They could care less. They're like, okay, it's gonna be a table. And you go to the house, and they have like drink rings all over it. They don't care. So the next time I build that same thing for that client, I'm going to build the same thing, but I'm going to use oak plywood and use hardwood edges and stuff like that, because they don't care. They don't even care about the craftsmanship that goes into it. So I'm not saying I'm going to rip them off. I'm just not going to put the same care that they don't put into it. So, I'm not going to bend over backwards making this thing, for whatever, a 20 or 30% profit, when I could make more profit, and they don't care either way.
Yeah.
They just, but I have clients that totally respect and see the quality that goes into it. And those are the guys I'll make sure, because I know they're looking and they care and they want to see it. So I'll make sure that I'll go overboard. So, it all depends on who you're working for. You make a beautiful bench for someone, you come in, it's in the closet, and it's got the cat litter box on it. And you're like, oh, I guess they don't. I guess I shouldn't have bent over backwards for that one.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up for this one, unless you guys have any other thoughts.
Nope.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for listening, and again, to our patrons and all their supporters for supporting us on Patreon. It makes a big difference. And I don't want to talk about it too much to where it bothers people, but it actually is really, really helpful for us. And it motivates us to do the show, continue to do the show. And we already enjoy it. So that's awesome. So anyway, I just want to say thanks to them.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
So where can we find out about everybody? David?
I am at drunkenwoodworker.com. Jimmy's making faces. I don't know if they're at me. Jimmy hates my site.
I'm just stretching my face.
Stretching my face. All right, I'm at drunkenwoodworker.com, and you can find all my YouTubes and Twitters and Instagrams and blogs there.
You can Google me at google.com.
How in the world did you get that site? That's insane.
Did I spell Google right?
Yeah, you did. Needs like 10 more O's in the middle there.
Bob.
Yeah, I'm all at ILikeToMakeStuff.com, and hopefully next week I won't have this crazy low voice. So that's it for us this week. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you have some ideas about this topic or topics for the future or anything, let us know at Making It Podcast on Twitter or on website. Get in touch with us. Let us know what you think, and we'll see you next week.
Later on.
Thank you.